How's it going, everybody? This is Novakast back with another video, and with this one, we'll be doing a brief review of Before I Wake. It was released in 2016, directed by Mike Flanagan, written by Mike Flanagan and Jeff Howard, starring Kate Bosworth, Oleskondor Resenditoval, I'm going to probably pronounce that very poorly, and Thomas Jane. Also, Jacob Tremblay, but yeah. Anyways, this film is an interesting one, and I'm really looking forward to kind of breaking it down and going through every little bit of it. And I'm trying something differently with this particular video, or this particular review. I'm trying out something that I haven't, or at least I think I attempted before, but I'm going to try again, so that way I can kind of stay focused on each and every point of the film. So without further delay, why don't we go ahead and get right into it. So I guess to start us off, we should talk about story, and it's a little bit of an intriguing one. The basic setup for this story is a grieving husband and wife are going to adopt, or at least foster, this child, bring him into their home, and right off the bat they start realizing that this kid may be very special. They start to realize that when this kid goes to sleep, all of his dreams come to reality, but also find out that not just his dreams but his nightmares as well. Now, all in all, the setup for this particular film is really cool. I like the idea of this, this child, which, by the way, for the most part, usually I would focus on where these powers come from, especially when it comes to magical kids. But to an extent, I wasn't very focused on that. If anything, I was more focused on how this could, especially like near the very end, what would be the extent of his abilities if he really found a way to control them. And the fact that not only do his his dreams, what he fantasizes in his dreams comes to life, but the very nightmares also coming to life. I mean, to an extent, the ideas are just, unimaginable. And the fact that this, to kind of set this up, this whole, husband and wife taking care of this child is also interesting, and to an extent it gets kind of messed up too, especially when it's made very clearly, especially when it comes down to them, their child, and eventually with them, I guess overall, with finding out about this ability, using the child to, I guess, see their dead son. In fact, the husband actually kind of says it literally as it is. They were using their foster child as a home theater or home projector to see their kid again, which again is really fucked up. By the end of it, I don't want to spoil too much, but the end of it is actually really intriguing, especially when it comes down to the setup, because at some point they introduce, and I want to go into more of characters as time progresses, but they bring up this thing called the Canker Man, and the movie itself, and I don't want to go into too much, but starts off with a man, or at least one of the previous foster parents, almost killing the child. And there's a point in the film where you realize that, again, with his nightmares coming to life as well, they can do things that unfortunately will cause more likely tragedy. And the mother, or at least the woman, the wife, the grieving wife, is kind of given the notion by, in this situation, that there are possibly two ways to try to deal with this being, the Canker Man. That being either to kind of like give it, actually, if anything, it's more of an ultimatum given to the point where it's either having to kill this kid who honestly just wants a family, or finding another way. And sure enough, again, there's a situation. And this was, again, the situation itself is, and the way they deal with this whole problem is really creative. I've really enjoyed it. And by the end of it, it kind of sets up, or at least kind of gives an idea of, the possibilities of this child and what he could possibly do. But enough about that. All in all, I was intrigued by the story, and as well as kind of the setup for it, as well as the as time progressed throughout the film. So, all in all, that's about what I have to say about story. Let's move on to characters. So, for the most part, I want to just kind of mainly focus on the main three, which is the wife, the husband, and the foster child. Now, I first want to start with the kid that played the foster child, which is Alexander Reshitiv. Again, I'm probably pronouncing or butchering that last name, or at least the name in general, so I do apologize. But the child and the role they play, again, is really intriguing. Especially when, again, with a child that can literally dream, or at least when they fall asleep, what they dream comes to life, is a really cool idea. And how that kid kind of goes through that whole experience is also, they present it really well. It's also really interesting, especially when it comes down to a kid who is afraid of their own dreams, especially when it comes down to their nightmares. Seeing a kid, or at least having to witness a kid go through, trying to stay up, and to an extent, I don't want to reference Nightmare on Elm Street, but I kind of do, especially when the nightmare, you die when you wake up, or you die when you sleep and stuff like that, or in your dreams. But to an extent, almost at least for the first part of the movie, the kid always wakes up and the monsters that are in the dream go away. Now, another thing too is, especially when it comes down to the situation with the child, what the child, like the thoughts and feelings of the child and how it's represented in the dreams is actually the more important thing that goes on. Because there is a big plot point near the very end. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but with everything that the child has gone through, it really influences his perception of life, and his perception and thoughts and feelings, and if anything, the creation of his nightmares. Which again, it's a really cool plot point, and I don't want to spoil it. Now moving on to the husband, who was played by Thomas Jane. Honestly, out of the two, I kind of felt like he was the most sensible one. And if anything, I liked him more. Too bad, though. I'm just going to quickly spoil this. He dies. I don't want to say too much, but his character does die. And there is a point where, to an extent, even though he has a chip on his shoulder, it's clearly set up that something happened involving their child with him. Again, I don't want to spoil. I want you guys to watch the film itself. He is the more sensible one compared to the wife. In fact, he's the one that calls out the wife when it seems like what they're doing is just using the child. In fact, word for word, he basically calls it abuse, or feels it's like abuse to what they're doing, using the kid to, show the kid images of their dead son, and using the kid to bring their son to life. all in all, I liked that character. Now, moving on, with that being said, though, moving on to the woman that played the wife. Kate Brosworth playing as Jessie. Jessie, I'm going to say, is understandable. The character is understandable. But at the same time, I don't know. I did not like this character at all. And it might just be me. Again, and just so you guys know, this is only opinion based. But this is just me. But I kind of felt the climax with her was kind of forced. Especially with what she does to the kid. And again, especially with, and it's really set up where she's the one that really needs to heal from what happened to her son. She needs to heal from her grieving. I get that. I really get that. But at the same time, it felt forced to me, especially with, what happens to the father. Again, not going into too much, but it's pretty fucked up. And I will say, like, near the very end too, there is something that, like, is really creepy that kind of shows, or at least is represented in what she was doing to the character Jacob, or her character doing to Jacob, which is really screwed up. But by the end of it, again, she is kind of given an ultimatum of whether to kill the child or find another way to kind of put him at peace. And I will give it this. It was done in a very sensible way. And though nonsensical with what happens, but that's just me. Now, again, each person plays their roles really well, but at the same time, again, I think if anything, like, trying to pick from the main three, I really enjoy the acting from Cody, especially with a kid, because for a lot of films, kids, especially with them being inexperienced with acting, sometimes are off when it comes to their acting. But either way, now I want to briefly talk about the Cankerman, because the Cankerman was played by Topher Bosquet. Hopefully I said that name correctly. This character is terrifying. And especially with what we see of it, it is just, again, it's gangly, it's very thin, there's a reason for it, and as well as its design. And the fact that like when it breathes, it's like very raspy breaths, and it does this thing that to people that is very disturbing. It's just, oh my gosh. But I'm gonna say this: I love its design. It's very simple, very very disturbing. I think the best word is very disturbing. But all in all, at least by the end, there is a reason for it, and I actually appreciate that, of why it looks the way it does. So with that, I'm done talking about characters. Let's go ahead and move on to the next segment, which is effects. So with effects, I don't know if I can say a lot to effects. The effects themselves look really, really good. Especially when, I guess if anything for the CGI. In terms of, I'm assuming they use CGI for whoever played the Cankerman because of how gangly the Cankerman looks. I'm pretty sure they used a suit with some green screen in some sections of the suit to make it, or at least portray this creature as thin as it was. Some of the visuals were really cool. I think one of the really interesting segments was more so with the butterflies, or at least when they're reappearing or disappearing. Um, the stuff with the Canker Man was incredible, as well as some of the more disturbing stuff that happens near the end of the film, as well as as speaking of that, some of the more disturbing visuals as well was really interesting, as well as some of the makeup that they used for some of the individuals, as well as some of the dream images or dream people that I'm going to call them, when it came down to the foster child, I think it was Jacob, creating, which again, it was really cool. So with that, like I said, there was not much to talk about with effects. I thought the effects were great. Minimal, but at the same time, really great, and especially when they needed to be used. So with that, why don't we go ahead and move on to my final thing, or at least the 4 final thoughts, and that being music. So, much like the effects, music in some way is very minimal, and I kind of like that, especially with this particular film. But when they have music, it's done really well. And I was trying to look at the composer who did the music, and it was an individual by the name of Peter Bateman, who was the composer and also brought in additional music, apparently. With what they did, I will say some of it was very... When there needed to be music, the music itself was really good. And there was a long list of other people that took part in the musical department. And all in all, it was really good music, and I enjoyed it. So, it was, again, just phenomenal. As well as, timing when it comes to what they put in. Okay, so, final thoughts. And I'm just going to say, just kind of quickly go through this. So, I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was really intriguing, especially when it comes down to what we are, witnessing, especially when it comes down to the child itself, who, the abilities that they have, and the potential that they could have, or at least that was kind of hinted at, again, with the very end. Characters themselves, since I'm only mostly focusing on the main 3, my biggest again, is the child actor that played as, I believe, Jacob. And when it comes to the dad, he would probably be close to my second favorite. The mom, however, not so much. The effects for this particular movie are, again, really good, especially when it comes down to adding to the dreamlike sequences that we see for the film, as well as the monstrous nightmare that is the Canker Man. Music itself, again, when it needs to be there, it was there, and it was still very, very good. So all in all, besides, again, a few, probably my only gripe, that being the mom character, all in all, I enjoyed this movie. It was a lot of fun. To an extent, for the first, I want to say 3 parts of the movie, kind of whimsical in some sense, but all in all, really enjoyable. And I think, if anything, this, for my rating for this film, has to be a 9 out of 10. Again, I think, if anything, my only gripe would have to be the mom character. But all in all, I actually enjoyed this film. It was a lot of fun. And I'm sure this, if anything, this is probably just going to be a one-shot, where it's like just one film and that's it. But it would be kind of curious to see a follow-up. I doubt it, but I doubt that would ever happen, but it would be really cool. So, once again, 9 out of 10 for me, or at least 4 before I wake. This was a great film, and I enjoyed it. Okay, so that was it for my review of Before I Wake. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this particular video. If you guys can, please leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. Also, I'd love to hear any feedback you guys have about the clips I've been using, or at least the kind of transitions I made for each section of this video, so that way I can kind of focus on one talking point after the next. But all in all, I really liked doing, or at least setting up this video. If you guys have any thoughts, or if anything, if you guys have anything you want me to review, let me know in the comments. If you guys want to follow us on social media, links are in the description down below, as well as check out our daily content and the weekly podcast. With that being said, this is Novakast signing off. Have a good one, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.